Hey everybody, welcome to Monsters Lounge. It's me, Jenny.
Hi, I'm Tressa.
Hooray!
Yay!
Yeah, I've discovered that I started to dance now in our intro to the song quietly in my chair.
It's very danceable.
Well, you know what? Pretty soon I'm just going to click the old unmute button and start adding my own lyrics.
Oh, you can't. But go ahead.
I'm going to try. I'm going to try real hard.
I approve.
Yeah. So we have a pre-recorded episode for everybody tonight, which we are doing right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
time is weird and fake.
And we have a wild story, which I was completely unaware of for the majority of my life. I don't know why I would be aware of it before that, but it's a wild story, and we have a great guest on.
Who's
friend.
that?
You know what? He is a friend to you, a friend to me, and a friend of the show. And he has been on before, and he has a ridiculous amount of knowledge about really dumb stuff. No, about a lot of things that I'm unaware of, and then he tells me about them, usually over breakfast or something along those lines.
Oh, that's delightful.
It's Jarrett Burton.
Yay!
Yay!
I'm the only... Okay.
Wait a second. This isn't live?
No, it is. We are having a live conversation.
We are having an actual conversation right now.
That is being recorded.
I'm going to need you to figure out how to play our theme song on that piano that you have back there in your luxurious apartment.
My grand piano? Back there?
Good job with the pointing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
This is my new
hard.
apartment. It's great. I just got finished moving in, so...
Oh,
Really
it's
nice.
beautiful.
Really,
a lot of
really
beige.
nice.
Yeah, I'm
beige?
on earth tones.
Mm-hmm.
Very
You must
calming,
live in the
earth
woods.
tones. We're really into blue over here. So,
Really?
yeah.
Now, are you also in paintings of yourselves?
Oh, well, we have them all
Is
over
that a
our house that we share
Obviously.
together.
I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't want them, but the people insisted that we have paintings of ourselves.
And
Yeah.
kept sending them.
I know.
Listen.
But they're gorgeous. They're
Of
beautiful
course, we're in
works of
them.
art.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Yeah,
our
they're
fans
beautiful.
are so talented.
Thank you.
Glad to be
Right.
here. Back on the lounge.
Just
Trying to use
lounging.
radio voice.
Yeah, please turn that on at any point in time right now. That would be great if you could do that. Jarrett, you have a wild story for us, and you've told me on a couple of different occasions because I can't retain things for very long. But we're going to be
Me
talking about
too.
Jack Parsons.
Yeah. This story has fascinated me for a while, and I'd kind of heard about Jack Parsons kind of like peripherally in any type of stuff I would be reading about, like occult magic in the US, but also he would come up when I would read about stuff related to the space program, which he is connected to both, which I thought was like pretty fascinating. And then a couple of years ago, there was a show, I think it was on Paramount Plus, called Strange Angel, which is about him. And I watched a couple of those episodes and kind of became ultra fascinated by this guy, tracked down some books. And then the more I learn about him, the more I'm kind of confused as to why he's been sort of pushed to the margins. And I sort of understand why, because of some of the stuff that he was interested in. But like long story short, we probably would not have been able to go to the moon, if not other places, without the involvement of Jack Parsons. So being able to talk about this guy and tell his story is pretty cool, just because of just his interest. He was a very, very fascinating, eccentric guy, and he lived a weird life and died in a very weird way. So I'm glad to be here to tell that story.
We're
Right.
not going to cover a big chunk of it
Yeah.
because, unless you go check out our Patreon episode, because it's filthy.
Yeah, so Jack Parsons was born in 1914. He came from a family that had some money. So his parents originally from over on the East Coast. They moved to California when he was very, very young. That's where Jack grew up, spent the majority of his life in Southern California. His dad left pretty early on. He was what they called a serial adulterer. And believe it or not, back then you could actually get arrested for that. So his dad was a serial adulterer and had to leave the state. So he fled back to.
Now, a serial adulterer, that means he likes to pay bills on time and take care of responsibilities
He had
really
That's
well,
that's
right?
serial adulting.
Oh, I'm
Oh, there's the
confusing the
difference.
two. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but close.
Okay.
You're
Yeah.
close. Yeah.
Mm.
So he dips back out to the East Coast. So Jack grew up without his dad around. So he mostly grew up just with his mom, who, like I said, had some money just from her family. And so Jack grew up in this big house in Southern California, mostly with like domestic servants, and was kind of I mean, I'll just be straight up because I was like this. He was a nerd. Like he was really into science fiction. Like this is like when
Not
kind of
me.
yeah, I know. Well, you guys are super cool.
Well, we are.
I'm the
Always since
nerd.
birth.
Yeah.
I've known
Uh,
this about you for years now
yeah.
that you were a nerd.
Yeah. But this was like when science fiction and like the pulp magazines were kind of taking off, like in the late 20s, early 30s. Sci-fi was like this thing he became obsessed with. So kind of this nerdy guy already starts to become obsessed with not only science fiction and like horror pulps, but also like the idea of like the atomic age. So he's starting to read all these magazines about one day man's going to go to the moon. He kind of becomes obsessed with space, and then like the apparatus of like how we are going to get there. So rocketry at that point had really not been developed, at least to the point that we needed to go into space. So Jack became like this self-taught rocketry expert. He was never really, really good in school. He was dyslexic. So majority of the stuff he did was completely self-taught. So he becomes obsessed with like blowing stuff up, basically. Like that's how he starts to get into this, is finding new and exciting ways to blow stuff up.
I love
Later-
that. Like, what child doesn't love to blow stuff up?
I
Let's
know.
make
hated
it my
that. That's
entire
terrible.
personality.
It's
What?
So loud.
You didn't blow stuff up when you were a kid?
No, I was totally opposite of that. I did not want the loud noises.
You were creating things?
Yeah, I was making things.
Nerd.
I know.
Okay.
But
Sorry.
he found friends too that liked blowing stuff up as much as he did, and so he had this little crew up into throughout high school who would create these new and very, very exciting ways to blow stuff up. In fact, Jack later in high school took a job at a blasting powder factory. So imagine if you're somebody who already has an interest in blowing stuff up, and now you work in a place where you're given the supplies to be able to blow stuff up.
Listen, that's the dream.
I'm guessing he took a backpack or a very large satchel to work each day.
Or he was
Yes.
asked to be paid in blasting powder.
Oh no, money! No, thank you. I'm just gonna take the scraps of that thing over there and use that. I'll just take that. Thanks.
Powder keg stuffed into a Jan spot. What is it?
Jansport.
Jansport.
Transport. Yeah, you were a nerd. You don't even know the brand of backpack.
I don't think
Shut
they
up,
had
Eddie.
Jansports back then. They
No.
may have.
He had one. He
Yeah,
made
he
them.
invented
He's
it.
the birther of
It
it.
had so many pockets for exploding things. Is really what it comes down to. He needed more pockets to put.
For exploding things?
For
He would
exploding
explode things in the
TNT.
pockets.
You know those fuses. They get fuses, right?
Well, it was the
Exploding
30s. I
things?
think they had the like the stick with the bandana tied onto it, and that's how they carried stuff around.
Right, the bindle. Uh-huh.
The
Yes,
And it
he
had
had
a
a
little
bindle.
patch that said Jansport on it. Come on, you guys. Catch
Here,
up.
side note, can we bring that back? Can we just start walking around with bindles? Can I
Yes.
make that a request of the three of us right now?
Yes.
The hobo look.
Perfect. Yes.
Mm. I mean, I'm already on it, so give me a bindle and I'm set.
We're getting there. I can make those because I spent my childhood making things.
I'm gonna blow yours up.
Oh, man.
So where was I? So blowing stuff up, gets a job at a blasting powder factory, every kid's dream. But him and a buddy of his just continue to create these new types of explosions, like even working with like aluminum, like souped up cherry bombs. They're out in the back garden blowing stuff up. It was, for him, this was like more than just a hobby. This was like his obsession, was learning how to blow stuff up.
A way of
Around this,
life.
I know.
Sorry.
And then around the same time, and this is kind of a I don't know, I guess like a hint of what would be to come with him. He starts to become interested in the occult, and the way he starts to become interested in the occult is through like these pulp magazines and science fiction and horror that he's reading in these magazines. So around that time, he starts to try and contact the devil. And he says this happened when he was in his early teens. He tried to have almost like a seance where he tried to contact Satan. And he said it was a debacle. I think that was his exact words. It was a supernatural debacle. And
that's the name of my autobiography.
It's a good name for the show if you guys ever have a spin-off show. Yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah, I like it. It can be us solving crimes that have nothing to do with the paranormal.
It will be very boring.
Oh, yeah.
But he has, he tries to contact the devil, and something happened because whatever it was kind of freaked him out enough to the point where he kind of put that stuff away for a few years after that. But it was interesting that even at an early age, he was trying to kind of experiment with occult related stuff, which would obviously be a huge part of his life later on, because this man absolutely led kind of a double life of science and the occult. And I think it's important to point out that even early on, he didn't really differentiate between the two a whole lot. He looked at the occult as basically just another form of science. That's why he would bring in some of this occult related stuff into the work that he would do later on in creating the technology for rocketry. But that was his first bit, was trying to have a seance and bring the devil into his bedroom.
Huh.
He wasn't that great of a student. When he graduated high school, it was around the time of the Great Depression. So a lot of the money that his family had, kind of like everybody else, his family lost a lot of that in the Great Depression. So instead of going to college, he ended up just going straight to work. But he didn't really see the need to go to college because he thought that he kind of knew or was working around people who were kind of making strides in the stuff that he wanted to do. So he kind of looked at college as unnecessary. So he didn't go to college himself, but he ended up making friends with some guys who were going to Caltech, which was in the area, and California Institute of Technology was kind of the place to go in the Western US if you were working on stuff like physics or applied sciences. A lot of the work that was being done to kind of create these early forms of rocketry was happening at Caltech. He makes friends with a couple of the guys that were part of a work group there at Caltech, and obviously demonstrated that he kind of like knew what he was doing. He knew what he was talking about. This wasn't just some like self-taught crank. And so he was invited to kind of come in and become a part of this work group over there, which later became known as the Gausset Rocket Lab. So that was his first time working as part of like a larger group, was over there at Caltech. Now Caltech, this group of rocket guys were working on the campus for a little while. Again, blowing stuff up, finding exciting ways to blow stuff up on campus. But eventually were asked to leave after one too many explosions. I think at one point they actually blew a huge steel door off of its hinges, and it flew through a wall and almost hit someone. So at that point, they were asked to completely vacate the premises and move out to the desert.
I thought flying steel doors was a part of college. Was it not for you guys?
Yeah, I thought I saw that in like Animal House or something. Right?
But this is where they got the name, the Suicide Squad, TM. This isn't the comic book Suicide Squad. This was the original Suicide Squad. That was their nickname for their rocketry group, just because it was looked at as eventually they were just going to blow themselves up, which they wore that name with the badge of pride. So they at that point moved out to the desert, where they just continued to work with nitroglycerin and blasting powder. And ultimately, what they were trying to do was find an ingredient or some recipe to create kind of sustained burn, sustained explosion that would help, propel rockets at the level at which they needed to be, which they hadn't up till at that point.
Huh. Yeah, no, that's it. Like, that's incredible.
Is this a good time to break into some game show questions?
It
Game
could
show
be.
questions, you say? Wait,
Maybe.
Oh, that's right. We have an extra bonus for this special pre-recorded event.
Oh
It's game
no!
show
You
time!
guys are in trouble now. So at 12, I believe it was, is when Parsons had summoned a demon or the devil, or whatever he called it, into his room that terrified him, as you had previously stated. What fake thing did you guys do at 12 that scared you?
Oh, boy.
I can tell you. So I think age 12 was when I would try to do Bloody Mary in the mirror.
Yes.
And I had to make sure there was other people in the room when I did it. And I think even now until this age, I will not do it by myself. And I'm a grown man. But age 12 was when I did that for the first time. That, and also I played with the Ouija board for the first time at age 12. And pretty sure
What were the
something
results?
happened. It was like I did it with another friend, and it just seemed to be violently going back and forth on the board, like in a very
Ew.
angry way. There was nothing spelled out. But at one point, I did not have my hand on it. It was just slightly touching it, and it was still moving. And
Ugh.
so I haven't really played with Ouija board since then. But
See,
Ouija board and Bloody Mary, same year. That was a very, very important age for me.
I feel like that's the year that you would do it. And
Yeah,
you
and
would
it
do
is, because my story also involves the Ouija board, where we tried to have a seance. My friend Marissa and Carrie and I. Weirdly enough, both of whom I still know. But we had the same thing, this seance with the Ouija board, and we had a candle, because we used these like last votive candles. One of those broke mid Ouija board session, and it scared the poop out of all of us.
Of
and
course.
I have still not touched a Ouija board due to that incident, that isolated incident, and all of the follow-up horror movies that I've watched involving it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I still have never touched one. I will not. I refuse.
We've talked to guests who have assured us that it's fine, and that everything is okay, and that it's just a tool, and
Yep.
has the intent of the user. But you know what? Still, I don't particularly need it, so I'm just gonna keep it over there.
Yeah, exactly. There's no
Have
need
either
for
of you
it.
done Bloody Mary before?
Yeah,
No,
but it never was
because
anything.
why would you want to? Like, I'm gonna go stand in a
Please.
bathroom in the dark by myself. Like, that sounds terrible. I was enough of a loser. I spent enough time by
And then if it
myself as a
works?
child, much less to go into a dark room.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And then
but I
what's
was
the exit
stupid and did
plan
it.
when
That's a good point.
when
Best
it
case
works?
scenario is something comes through a mirror at you.
Right.
Right. And then what?
What do you do? What do you
And
do?
then you're like,
Turn the
great
lights
talking
on.
to you.
Listen, we had a very small house growing up, and it was a very small bathroom. There was nowhere I was going to go if something came out of the mirror at me.
But if you turn the lights on, it goes away. According to the story.
Says you.
Yeah, that's not how things work. It doesn't just disappear because the lights are on.
Mhm.
That's not how spirits work. Come on, you
No.
guys. All right, 1935. 1935. Parsons and Foreman, his bestie, they met up with Frank Molina, and they got into that whole science thing at the school. I forget. Was
The
it
Gausset Rocket Lab.
Right. In their introduction, they're like so psyched because he's actually talking to them about space travel. At this time in the world, space travel was science fiction, and if you could not talk about it seriously with scientists, they would think you were cuckoo bananas. So Frank Molino's like, I'm so into this, but STFU about the space travel stuff. And so my question to you, dear guest, is what is considered cuckoo bananas science fiction now, but will not be in, like, I don't know, 30 years?
Ooh, you know what? I think one that'll be really big is just being able to do stuff through like messing with like CRISPR and chromosomes and stuff. Like I think they'll eventually be able to turn off aging,
Oh, yeah.
at least in a pretty dramatic way. But I think that becomes obviously ultra problematic because they're not going to let everybody do it. So it will be something obviously for the rich, and then everybody else is going to just continue to age as normal. But yeah, I think being able to do almost like that and like weird eugenics stuff where like you can have designer babies based on you know, what they can do with DNA at that point.
Well, I hate all of that.
I do
Unless it's
too.
free
Yeah.
and I cannot age anymore. Jeni, how about you?
I think it's going to be a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this show.
We talk about a lot of stuff, Jeni. You're gonna have to be a little bit more specific.
I think we're gonna find you know, more and more connections with aliens in UFOs, and probably have interactions with them that are not super classified. And I think that we'll probably learn a little bit more about how quantum physics works, and be able to harness some of that to at least interact with aliens and at least ghosts. I don't know about the cryptids quite yet, but I'm thinking hauntings might be a little bit more explained, and UFOs.
I hope you're right.
Yeah, that's what I'm going with at any rate. I like that much better than the dark twists and turns that
And eugenics.
in eugenics, yeah.
So, you guys, in 1938...
Sorry to be a bummer.
Yeah. It was great talking to you.
Way to go. Better go play that piano.
In 1938, the gang got together. You know, they're doing their science explosive things. Explosive.
Explodey. Explodey.
Okay.
Yeah, I like explosive, though. It sounds splooshy. Anyway, they were given a grant by the government for $32,000 in total. In today's money, that is $704,285.96. Now, if you did not graduate college like myself, and you had a hobby you were really into, what would the government give you $704,285.96 to do?
Wow. Monroe, you may have to go first. So no questions asked, 700K. And I look at it as a grant.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would go to the national parks and do mapping of the various mineral deposits that are there, and try to tie them in with unusual and paranormal events that occur within those parks.
Oh, now you got me.
And then we would definitely have some sort of map of the Grand Canyon, because there are a ton of those caves in the Grand Canyon that have not even been discovered, and very few have been explored. So,
You know, you lost me with mapping, but then you got me right back with all that other junk. Thank you, Jeni.
naturally.
I would probably, so if you're going to the national parks, I would probably go and try to do something maybe similar in Eastern Kentucky, West Virginia area, where there's like the huge electromagnetic anomalies happening. And maybe buy like a tiny house that I can plop somewhere right in the middle, or some kind of customized van. And
Some
then
deluxe camper.
exactly. And then try to commune with the Mothman. Or whatever form he's taking at that point in time. I think the Mothman and a lot of the stuff that happens in that area is the same anomaly, just in different forms. So I think I would probably try to explore out there, including the big cave systems. So the Eastern Kentucky cave systems as well.
That would be then we could work together at some point about the cave systems, and
Well, we
develop
could
all
meet
sorts of-
underground. We would each go in.
and that's how we would get our next grants to study how those things all connect and what their tie-in is to both UFO and Bigfoot.
Hmm.
I support all of these ideas. Thank you for your input.
We are going to do
No.
good work.
You are. I can't wait for you to get that grant, each of you, for that much money.
If you're
Garrett, you on
listening,
it?
the
You gonna write that
government, we're ready.
Now, Parsons liked to recite a poem named Hymn to Pan that Aleister Crowley wrote before any experiments or work he did. If you were to recite a poem before doing whatever dumb work you do, what would it be?
Easy peasy. Rainbow connection. Boom. The question wasn't even done, and I have that.
Thank you,
Well,
Jeni.
expand why.
Because
what?
it's the best lyric, song, poem, whatever you want to call it, ever written. It's all
But
about
why?
awesomeness and magic and stars and friends and
The show.
the best things in life. You can't be sad hearing that ever.
That's almost like a whole manifestation thing you got going on. I like it. I like it.
Yeah, you can't be upset around Kermit or anything Kermit related.
Wait, is he gonna be there with you?
Well, that's
reciting
what
it?
you think about when you're reciting the Rainbow. Who doesn't think about Kermit? First of all, a lot. Secondly, hearing the Rainbow Connection. How did you not see this sort of enthusiasm coming when you wrote this question?
I don't know. I thought you would be like, ugh, poems. Shut up.
I
gotta
gotta
be
say,
chill. No.
I don't. And I'm not making this up. I don't know any poems off the top of my head, so it would probably be. Could I do like a dirty limerick or something?
100%. It's your life.
Yeah, I would do the Man from Nantucket dirty limerick
That tracks.
And why?
because that's the only one I can think of,
That tracks.
That's great.
and it has profanity in it.
Uh-huh. And oftentimes I hear him just mumbling it.
Hmm.
That's great. You guys, we're gonna go to break now. We'll be back in just.
So where we left off, Jack was working with his friends at the Caltech Gaussett Rocket Research Group. And without getting too bogged down in those details, they just continue to do more and more rocket research. Basically, just like I said, trying to find ways to create sustained burn for rocket engines. To different degrees of success, eventually they start to find some stuff that really works, which is kind of a combination of liquid and solid rocket fuel, up into the point where the government sees some of the success they have and continues to fund the experiments for like a longer period of time. So they start to get these government and armed forces grants, because ultimately the government doesn't necessarily see it as something that's a gateway to space. They see it as something where they can create weapons out of it. So they were happy to give them money just to continue to build these rockets. So that's kind of where we're at, like with the science part. But it's around this time too that Jack starts to get more and more into the occult stuff. So we had mentioned early on, he does a seance with a demon when he's younger. He continues to have an interest in it as he gets older. Around the time, there's also a guy I'm sure everybody here has heard of named Aleister Crowley, who was living in England at the time. Do we know who that is, ladies?
Why don't you do just a brief overview for the listeners that are dumb? I'm just kidding. You guys are smart. You guys are smart.
Man, I was just thinking Tressa's doing so great. And then boom, nope.
You should have a little tally, like the amount of times Tressa insults the audience today, like ding, put a number up. No, Aleister Crowley is and was kind of the most famous practicing magician of all time. He was the creator of Thelema, which was kind of his own religion. He had a series of lodges where people could practice Thelema called OTO, which stands for the Ordo Templi Orientis. He was also a drug addict. He was possibly a spy for the British in World War II. He was a mountaineer. He was a degenerate. There was a lot of things Aleister Crowley was, but the main thing is he was really responsible for creating Thelema, which was this religion that was kind of a mix of some Kabbalah, some ancient Egyptian spirituality, a lot of ritual magic, Enochian stuff. He was always trying to contact his guardian angel and do other kind of high ritual magic. And Parsons kind of does some readings of some of Crowley's books and becomes interested in Thelema, ends up striking up correspondence with him through the mail. And so they were writing each other. Crowley eventually suggests for Parsons to go check out the OTO Lodge, which was in Southern California near him. And Parsons and his wife end up going almost nightly. So their lodge was called the Agape Lodge, which was down near Pasadena. A lot of ritual magic, a lot of sex magic, just putting that out there. That was a lot of what was practicing at these lodges. And it became more and more just a part of his everyday life. So he had this double life at the time where he is, this man of science and has these government contracts and he's working at this university. But at the same time, he's going home at night and practicing kind of this high ritual magic. And that's why I said earlier, he really didn't see too much of a difference between the two. Because in his own life, he was seeing results from some of these rituals that he's doing, and he's seeing results at work and some of the advances that they're making in the rocketry. So in his mind, the two are kind of intertwined. So the more advanced he gets into the magic, the more advanced the rocketry is getting at the work side. He also had a house in Pasadena, which he nicknamed the Parsonage, which is catchy. And it became known as like this kind of ritual magic house. I think the neighbors at the time reported, all manner of craziness going on, people coming in and out at all hours, but also like some supernatural stuff, reported hearing like disembodied voices, stuff flying off shelves. It was almost like a weird, like Harry Potter house in the middle of Pasadena on an otherwise like nondescript neighborhood. So that was
Harry Potter. Did they do that? I don't remember that part of Harry Potter.
Wasn't there magic stuff in Harry Potter?
There was?
Yes. Yes. Come on,
I'm thinking of something else, I think. I don't know.
I have given you complete sets, both of you, for Christmas this past year and told you to read them for this specific moment right now.
Wait.
Or maybe think of it as
disappointing.
Maybe think of it as an adult themed Harry Potter house.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Because there's some stuff going on in that house that didn't happen in those books.
I feel like that's a thing that you shouldn't ever Google, by the way.
Adult Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Rule 34.
Yeah, don't do it.
Don't Google that either.
No.
But what's interesting though around the time is that Parsons' wife decides to leave him around this time too, because she is while she's into some of this stuff, she is not into it as nearly as much as he is. And so his wife decides to leave him. And so what does he do? He starts a love affair with his now ex-wife's younger sister. Who at the time when they started seeing each other, I'll use that as the euphemism, she was about 18 or 19 years old. And in that house, it was very much like a libertarian, free love, like proto-hippie as far as like the actual like physical relationships between people in that house. And the sex magic was just a huge part of the ritual and what they were doing through that temple. So Parsons didn't really think twice about having multiple partners, including the younger sister of his now ex-wife.
Sure, why? Why would he?
Yeah, I mean, you got to type.
Totally
you gotta
reasonable.
Can't
get more one type than sisters.
Yeah, it's maybe the worst thing that I've said all week. Possibly. I love it.
Now, the other person who kind of pops into his life at that point and really becomes another character in the story is L. Ron Hubbard. And I'm assuming everyone knows L. Ron Hubbard is. If you don't,
why don't you explain it for the idiot?
L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard obviously is the creator of Scientology, kind of a well-known, and now this is me just, this is my opinion, kind of a well-known con man, charlatan, very much in his DNA. But yeah, most well known for creating Scientology. When he kind of comes into Parsons' life, this is pre-Scientology. At this time, Hubbard had been out of the military. He was in the Navy prior to all this. Kind of an undistinguished Navy record, even though he would later write that he was like this hero at war. None of it was true.
What?
I know. If you can imagine, he really
Yeah.
trumped up this history of himself.
Oddly enough, wasn't he? Hadn't he been a sci-fi writer for a fairly significant period of time by that
Yes,
point?
and that's why actually Parsons and Hubbard really hit it off, because they really had the same interests. So Hubbard was into sci-fi as much, if not more, than Parsons was. Hubbard had been trying his hand at writing science fiction. In fact, a lot of the basis of Scientology you could look at came out of the root of the stories he was writing for science fiction magazines. So they both had this interest not only in science fiction, but also in occult magic, because Hubbard also had an interest, even though later on they would deny it, and the Church of Scientology would deny that he had any kind of connection to ritual magic. He very much did, because he
Didn't they
was...
like, I'm sorry, didn't they make like a statement where they basically said L. Ron Hubbard went and he conquered the bad magic people.
So
He's a
Yeah,
hero.
he was like a spy for the.
So what I think the official Scientology story was that the U.S. government had contacted L. Ron Hubbard to go undercover into Jack Parsons' house, live there with him, and then liberate the women who were being held there under magical control by Jack Parsons.
Which is why on International Women's Day we do celebrate.
L. Ron
There's
Hubbard,
flags with his face.
Yes.
Everybody knows
What a
that.
hero. Yes, everybody everywhere does. Even
he
our dumb
liberated them.
listeners.
He did. I have a bumper sticker. It's right next to my.
Now, I can tell you, he very much did liberate them. In fact, he liberated Jack Parsons' partner from him. He liberated
Oh,
her
man.
sexually from him.
That's so
Uh,
nice.
Took
Of
Jack
him.
Parsons' partner, which again was his ex-wife's younger sister.
Mhm.
L. Ron Hubbard promptly starts a relationship with her once he moves into the house.
That's so nice.
And
Oh,
so
man.
there was a
Important.
little bit of animosity between the two because of it.
Why?
Well, what's interesting is Parsons didn't want to come off like he was pissed, because he was part of this this ritual and this movement. Like I said, it was very much like libertarian, like they're, we don't own each other physically, as far as like we share ourselves with each other. He didn't want to look like he was, owned anybody. And so when Hubbard kind of took his partner, he had to kind of just sit there and take it, which was obviously the cause of some animosity between the two. But it real quickly, this is what's interesting though, is because that's kind of an inciting incident. So Parsons is kind of like embarrassed, he has his partner taken away from him in his own house, but he's still doing a lot of ritual magic, and now he's bringing Hubbard into it because Hubbard's really getting into the ritual part of it as well. And so that's what inspired what is later called the Babylon Working, which was kind of the big series of rituals that Hubbard did with Parsons over the span of a few years. And the whole point of the Babylon Working was to, and this is going to sound funny, I'm just going to say it, the whole point of the Babylon Working was to literally kind of pluck a spiritual elemental out of the ether and put it into a human host, which would then become Parsons' partner, and they would create what was called the Moon Child, which was supposed to be like the next coming of the Antichrist. So that sounds very convoluted, but that was the whole point of the Babylon Working.
That didn't sound convoluted at all.
That sounded pretty straightforward.
And that was about as
actually.
straightforward as I could explain it.
Of course, the Moonchild, which is something that I have not heard of before, and it sounds so pleasant for someone who is going to bring about the end of times.
Yeah. But
Okay.
this Babylon working went on for the span of a couple of years, and it usually ended up with Hubbard and Parsons going out to the desert, doing Enochian magic, doing all kinds of like Thelema magic, and Hubbard was like the scribe or scryer. So like Parsons would get in these ecstatic states and start to like basically speak in tongues, or he would get stuff beamed into his head and it would come out gibberish, and L. Ron Hubbard was there like writing it down, and trying to make sense of the stuff that was like coming through them as they were doing these rituals. And what was interesting is Hubbard started to get his own visions of what he called like the Scarlet Woman. So he kept getting visions of like this like red-headed woman with green eyes that was going to be Babylon, which was that elemental, right? And he just kept seeing these visions. So he keeps telling Parsons like, we got to keep doing it. Like this Scarlet Woman's going to come eventually. So they're doing this stuff out there with a span of like a couple of years. Eventually they get back from the desert one time, back to the parsonage. There's a knock on the door, and there's a red-headed woman with green eyes at the front door. And that was a woman named Marjorie Cameron, who eventually became Parsons' live-in partner for the rest of his life. But this, if you're Parsons and you're doing these rituals and you're here with Hubbard saying like, this is working, the Scarlet Woman's going to come, and then eventually that happens, I don't know how you're supposed to believe that it's not working.
100%.
Right.
Because the Scarlet Woman did show up, and she became Marjorie Cameron's very interesting. You look her up. She was just as eccentric as Parsons was. She ended up being in some movies later with Kenneth Anger, who was an occult filmmaker. Very, very fascinating woman. But yeah, she was with Parsons for a while, up to, I think, near the end of his life. But that was kind of the what had happened with the Babylon working. By the way, the Moonchild was never
Thank
conceived.
God. Oh, thank God.
Moonchild did not happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Marjorie Cameron was there.
You know what? Real quick.
Game show time.
Game show
Couple
time.
questions. Hey, let's say we put together and all lived in a giant mansion on Millionaire's Row that's totally not gross and PG-13. What are you going to call it?
Ooh.
Crap. That's a good one.
And what's our motto?
It's
I mean,
got
it is
to be
called
something
like the
about like
parsonage. You
it's,
could just
it's
be the Monroeage. It's fine.
well, the Monroe house
Monroe Village.
makes the most sense. Obviously, I have a very striking last name. I think we should name it the Monroe House, and I
Okay.
think that our motto should be bring us all of your puppies and kittens and goats.
Yeah,
That
I would
seems
say
like more of a rule than a motto, but okay.
Well, motto, rule, tomato, tomato.
All right.
I could say it would be the Monsters Lounge Home for Wayward Pets.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Nice.
And wayward also means sometimes we just take them.
Yes,
Or they just show
obviously.
up.
Or they just show up because they've heard of us. And we would have speakers playing the Rainbow Connection most
And they
of the
pay
time.
rent.
They do.
Obviously.
They
Come
do.
on.
We put
We-
on traveling shows with
Mhm.
said wayward animals.
They get little jobs.
Oh, little
tiny,
puppy
tiny
jobs.
tiny puppy jobs. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
All right, I'm
pushing
gonna.
strollers and things. No, go ahead.
Oh,
I know.
little puppy strollers.
Yeah, little puppy
I think
strollers.
a puppy doorman, like
Oh,
A little
Yes.
suit,
tiny
uh-huh,
little
suits.
hat.
puppy old-timey elevator operator.
Very good. Very, very good. He has trouble with the gate, but that's okay.
We'll do something so that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk just a little bit because I don't want to talk about this guy that much, but just a little bit about Aleister Crowley. As a child, it was reported that he was only allowed to read the Bible. So my question to you is, what book is your child only allowed to read? Only it's exclusively.
That's another good one, too. You want to teach them about life, but you also want to protect their little childhood.
And kind of mess with them as well.
Yeah. All of those things.
Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard. The keys to life are in there.
Yeah, everybody knows that.
Well, you want to give them something that's, they're not going to get bored of, so you don't want to give them something too basic. I mean, look, when I was a kid, I was a weirdo. I started reading like Stephen King books when I was like 8, and then my parents were just happy I was reading, so they never checked in on what I was reading.
Yeah.
So I would just give them like like one of those 1,000-page Stephen King books, like maybe It or The Stand.
Yeah, I feel like It. I said it a couple of seconds ago, but I feel like nobody heard me, so I'm saying it again. But I feel like It would be a good one because you need to instill that fear of clowns like really young.
Mm-hmm.
In the sewer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. My next 2 questions are boring trivia questions. Are you ready? Good.
No.
Too bad. How many times did the Alan Parsons Project perform live?
5.
You just wait a second. For this question, did you just look up Parsons and then you got the Alan Parsons Project?
No, somebody said something to me and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that.
I'm going to say 0.
Incorrect.
Okay.
You're going to go with 5? The answer is 1 at the night of the proms in October 1990. Thank you. It was too complicated to do at the time when they were popular.
But Price is Right rules, I would have gotten that correct, right?
Yeah, that is correct, yes.
I am conceding that point.
Yes.
Okay.
And finally, before I let you continue, Mr. Crowley's a song by Ozzy Osbourne. About Aleister Crowley, obviously. Randy Rhoads' solo in the song became one of the best known in heavy metal. What was it ranked on the list of the best guitar solos according to readers of Guitar World magazine?
5.
No.
It's 5.
It is not.
I'm going to guess 3.
28. Good guess, both of you guys.
Man.
Yeah.
Price
You would have won Price is Right rules.
Price is Right rules. It's me. I win.
One of the best at 28. Let's hear some more about Parsons.
I think we were going to get into real quickly L. Ron Hubbard and the way him and Parsons kind of parted ways.
Yeah, yes. We were.
That's a great part.
This is one of my favorite stories, and I sometimes can't tell it without laughing because it sounds like slapstick comedy. So around this time, like work-wise, like Parsons isn't doing great. He's been tailed by like the FBI and the CIA because they are aware of his occult ties. So he's doing all this wacky occult stuff while still working with government contracts. So of course he's being tailed by any number of government agencies. Eventually loses some of those contracts, so he's not as flush with cash as he once was. Around this time, L. Ron Hubbard comes up with a harebrained scheme to start a almost like a fancy yacht company. And what he was going to do is go and buy these kind of yachts that were in disrepair, and he was going to like fix them up and then sell them at a higher price. And this is how
he's going to flip them.
He was going to flip yachts. Parsons, as smart as he was also very dumb when it came to this stuff, and or naive at least. And so he gave L. Ron Hubbard $20,000, which that was $20,000 at the time. I'm not sure what that is now. It's probably in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. But he gave it to L. Ron Hubbard to go and start this yacht company. So L. Ron Hubbard dips out of California, goes over to the East Coast, not by himself, mind you, because that former partner of Parsons, his ex-wife's younger sister, goes with L. Ron Hubbard, and they are off together starting this thing. Okay,
that's nice, keeping him company.
Starting the business, giving him some support. And the thing is, L. Ron Hubbard had no plans on including Parsons in on any of this. So he did take the money, and he went off and did start buying yachts, but with no plan on fixing them up, and definitely no plans on giving the money back to Parsons. So this is interesting if you know anything about Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard anytime he kind of gets in trouble, just goes off to sea. Because of maritime law, I guess it's harder to get him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Also, it's the ocean. It's
yeah,
harder to find
it's
him.
harder to find him. But this is kind of the impetus.
Wait.
Is now a good time to tell you that my plan is to eventually abscond with our tens of dollars and gather a fleet of broken boats
Rowboats?
together?
And you're going to
Okay.
have to consult multiple countries based on where she is in the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
on who's going to track her down.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I just wanted to hear more about international law, and you guys did not disappoint. Okay, continue.
So L. Ron Hubbard and Sarah Northrop, who was Parsons' former partner, are off at sea in this yacht. Eventually, over time, Parsons realized that he's been taken in a scheme, and obviously,
Wait, but how long?
months. He didn't hear from him for months, and Hubbard's just at sea. He's living on this yacht in the middle of the ocean.
But my question is he did actually buy more than one yacht, right?
Yeah, he was planning on doing
So-
more than just the one, but
Did
he was
take
going to
them
cut.
all
He
with
was going to
him?
cut
Like,
Parsons out completely.
Right,
I think
but-
they were moored. They were moored somewhere. I think off the coast
Okay.
of Florida.
so he was just out on one, or did
Yes.
he just take all of them with him and just live on one?
No, he didn't have a flotilla of yachts. He was on the one.
Did he do some sort of water world thing where they roped all the boats together and just he was creating his own?
It became
Jenny,
a yacht.
he already said no.
It became
Come
a
on.
yacht city off at sea.
Yacht City.
Now, the way that this story ends, there's two different versions of the story. There's the kind of like official, not weird ending, which is
Nope.
Parsons
No,
tried
thank
to
you.
and I'll tell you
Next.
the boring one first, and then I'll tell you the good one. The
Okay.
boring one is that Parsons took Hubbard to court and eventually got some of the money back, not all of it. That's some of the story. They try to say what happened. The fun version of the story is that Parsons, feeling very jilted, as anyone would, decided to fly out to Florida, because that's where he knew that Hubbard had been recently. That's kind of where they had taken off from. And he goes out to the coast and begins to start doing ritual magic, with the intent of bringing Hubbard back through magical means. So he starts to do these rituals to, I believe it was Ares, the god of war. It makes more sense if it was Poseidon to me.
Yeah,
but
right?
You would
He
think
starts-
you would go with that one.
he starts doing a ritual to Ares, and all of a sudden the weather turns terrible, and there starts these huge storms and squalls at sea, which damages the boat to the point where Hubbard has to go back to shore for fear of the boat sinking, being out in those conditions. Apparently, the legend says that Parsons was waiting there with the police as Hubbard gets back. Hubbard, ever the con man, is able to like talk him out of having him arrested, and Parsons, being naive, falls for it under the promissory of "I'm going to pay you back," which, by the way, he
yeah.
never fully paid him back. But
And had
that
to
was
go to
kind
court.
of the end of the friendship between the two.
Why?
Kind of as it were.
What's a yacht city between friends, really?
But I like the legend version of the story better than
It's
just
so
the
much
small
better.
claims court, non-magical.
So much better.
So
Yeah.
much more fun.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the end of their magical partnership. And then obviously L. Ron Hubbard would go on to do his thing and write Dianetics and create Scientology and distance himself from magic. And Parsons would kind of go on to kind of a depressing end. Like I said, he had been kind of blackballed from working for governments. He took a job for Howard Hughes, the famous weirdo aircraft
know that.
inventor,
Mm-hmm.
and got fired from that job when he got caught taking secret plans home to his house. And when he was asked why he did it, he said that he wanted to show someone on his resume what he had been working on, which I think is a terrible excuse.
No.
And they
I
said,
wanted to
I
show
think that's-
people
I
these
think
top
that's-
secret things.
I think that's great. I mean, what
Yeah.
better way to get a high security
Better job. Yeah.
yeah.
than to show the things that you stole from your last high security job?
And someone had
Makes total
called
sense.
the FBI about it because Hughes Aircraft had a ton of government contracts. The FBI said, well, why are you taking these? And he said it was for his resume that he was trying to show some companies in Israel. So the FBI immediately assumed that he was spying for Israel, which
Why?
completely blackballed him altogether from taking aerospace jobs at all. So he was now completely blackballed from doing like the one thing he loved to do for a living. And for the rest of his life would take odd jobs for movie companies creating like explosives and explosive props for movies. But sadly, he ended up having to take a night shift at a gas station. That was one of the last things he did, like in the last couple of years of his life. Still had the parsonage, would like rent it out to people, but he was working nights at a gas station and doing odd jobs building explosives for movie companies, which eventually is what ended his life, as he was working on an explosive for a movie in his garage. He was working with fulminated mercury and some other really high dangerous explosive materials and blew himself up in his garage and survived the explosion initially. It blew off half of his body, one of his arms, his face.
No.
And he
God.
survived and ended up dying later en route to the hospital. And the thing with his death is that it's been speculated for years that it was not an accident, only because this guy was very versed in building these types of explosives. And to make the kind of amateurish mistake that he would have made to blow himself up, a lot of his friends didn't see it as something that could happen. I also should say that he was, in his later years and even earlier, very much a drug user. I mean, he was using opium, heroin, amphetamines. And so when you're consistently using that stuff, but also working with dangerous chemicals in a garage,
What could
something
go
could
wrong?
easily happen.
Oh,
That's
Never
so
mind.
weird. I've never heard of
Yeah.
that being a dangerous combination ever.
Yeah.
Now, I really like how we keep talking about like the end of his life, and the assumption is sort of like, oh, okay, he lived for a little while, and he was not old when he died.
No.
He was like what, 37?
Yeah. He
37.
He did
in
all
the
of
early
these things.
50s.
Yeah.
And
All of these things by age 37.
he was very kind of like quickly written out of history, as far as like his contributions to rocketry and the space program. Although the people who worked for NASA did acknowledge him. There's actually a crater on the moon named after him. Once they went to the moon, it's on the dark side of the moon. Ooh, but it's named after him. But his contributions are largely overlooked, mostly because of the occult stuff, which NASA, wanting to take itself as seriously as an organization, didn't want that type of connection. But over time, his contributions were more and more brought to the surface, and people now understand how much of that stuff was due to his advances that he made, not only personally, but through his Jet Propulsion Lab and the other groups that he worked with.
Wow.
And obviously through his work on Yacht City.
In Yacht City.
Obviously.
Yeah. Marina City. I think we should call it Marina City. Has a nice ring to it.
It's too on the nose.
Yeah, I like Yacht City. It sounds like there would be a really good ad campaign that could
But
be centered
Yachtville?
around Yacht City. Yachtville would work too. I can hear the jingle in my head right now.
All right. You guys, we're all out of time. Jarrett, thank you
Ooh.
so much for telling us this wonderful tale of magic and science and weird stuff.
Glad to be here. Glad I could tell it. I will say there's a couple books written on him if you're interested, and that show Strange Angel, I think you can get it on Amazon. So check it out if you can. Very, very
Fantastic.
fascinating guy.
Fantastic. Everybody else, we'll see you next week. Don't forget to check out our socials and subscribe, rate, and stuff. I'm never going to be good at that.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Meh.